Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 19th Board of Directors meeting for La Plata Electric Association. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 9:01 and ask for approval of the agenda. Are there any modifications, or could I get a motion to accept the agenda as is? Rachel.
Excuse me. I'd love to add in just a quick update from the Finance and Audit Committee and executive session, just about their executive session. And then that, good to go.
Okay, appreciate that. Any other suggested additions or subtractions? Okay, if not, then could someone go ahead and make a motion to approve the agenda with Rachel's addition? Tim, I see.
Someone makes the motion.
All right, motion by Kohler. Tim, can I get a second? Thank you. Moved and seconded to approve the agenda with Rachel's addition to have some additional discussion from Finance and Audit Committee in executive session based on the executive session that was held in the Finance and Audit Committee. Any more discussion on that? Okay, then all in favor of that agenda, go ahead and raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Any abstentions? Okay, we have an agenda. Let's see, I commented before we went live that that John Lee won't be with us today. He has an excused absence for the day. And I'm, yeah, and other than that, we have a full room. So thanks, everybody. We will actually, let's go ahead and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance if you join me.
I was just going to ask you about that. Thanks.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And well done on the IT front. Appreciate that. That was great. Okay, next item on the agenda, member comments and concerns. Let's see, let's just check and see if we have any. And if we do, then Graham will go ahead and read the preamble. But do we have anybody in the waiting room?
Betsy Romeri.
And hands up or no?
I don't see any hands up as wanting to comment.
Okay, so seeing no members with comments right now, we'll move past that section of the agenda and straight into the agenda item 3, consent board items. Is there anything on that people want discussion or clarity on before we move into a motion? Tim, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant to send these ahead of time and I didn't get to it for some reason. I was busy. So in the minutes, it indicates that one of the members was both a webinar attendee and an in-person attendee. And I thought that would be maybe difficult to do. I'm not sure if that's accurate.
That is accurate.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, she had joined us in person and then decided to join us via webinar.
Okay. All right. That's
Mystery
great.
solved.
All right. And there was one other one in the audit presentation. It says, this is on page 3 of the packet, page 2 of the minutes. The first sentence, it says, Tammy Totsky provided an overview of LPEA's financial audit for the period of 2022 to 23. I think that's just for fiscal year 2023. she didn't provide an audit for 2022 in this presentation, in my recollection. So I don't know if we want to make that change.
That seems like a reasonable and simple change unless there's any objections from the board.
That was all I had. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get that to you earlier, Janelle.
Okay.
I'll let it slide this time, Tim.
Thank you.
And will you pretty please take a note to make that edit?
You got it.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, with the minor change to meeting minutes, anything else in consent board items? Okay, then would entertain a motion to approve the consent board items.
So moved.
Thank you, Tim.
I'll second.
I saw Kohler with a second. Thank you. Moved and seconded to approve the consent board items. Any further discussion? Okay, then all in favor of approval of the consent board items with the minor edit to the meeting minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Or abstentions? All right, consent board items approved, passed. Moving on to agenda item 4, CEO and staff reports, and I'll pass the mic to Graham.
Thank you. Let's see. Drew, would you be able to share the dashboard for me?
Yep, I sure can. How's that?
Thank you. All right, let's roll into next page. All right, so green check marks across the board. We've continued to do very well in all of our metrics and meeting or exceeding all of the board's goals relative to key performance indicators. Any questions on this particular slide? Okay, go to the next one. Be safe and excellent in all we do. We had another month of no lost time events. We had 14 line workers attend the Mesa Hotline School in Grand Junction. I know I was able to see it there in person. It was a pretty impressive sight and talked to some of the guys in the field. I had a great experience. It's really fantastic to kind of coordinate with people from other utilities. I know David was there with me and got to see it up close. So it was a pretty cool opportunity for me personally to be able to see that. 100% regulatory compliance. We completed a pole top rescue training, right? And very important skill for our line workers and field workers to remain up to date on as much as possible. So excellent to kind of keep that up and running. No cyber incidents, and we've upgraded our firewalls to protect our server network. So that's a really great enhancement that Drew's team has rolled out to keep us safe and secure on the cyber front. And then on our major continuous improvement projects, we do have cost of service study as one of those improvement projects. And we are, this being the May dashboard, by the end of May, we were very close to our third-party partner selection, which we did make in the beginning of June. So we were going to report on that in next month's dashboard, but that's just sort of the timing variance between reporting on last month for this month's board meeting. Kirsten, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Can you talk for a second in the cyber realm there about our cyber insurance and what is covered and how our rates are going on that?
I would prefer to do that in executive session just because there's some potential threats that can come out of that. So yeah, we can definitely take that topic up in executive session, but appreciate the question. Anything else on this slide? All right, let's go to the next one. Keeping the lights on. So we continue to comply with our wildfire mitigation plan. We completed 3 Raptor protection installations on primary dips. We replaced 13 poles and trimmed 35 overgrown distribution spans. So big kudos to the crews for accomplishing all of that work in the month of May. Also, we are ahead of work on our capital projects. 32% have been completed, including Shenandoah undergrounding, Lake Forest, Durango West, Electra Lake, Yucca Estates, and Turtle Lake are all undergrounding in progress as well. So great job to the crews to keeping the work moving on that, especially as we sort of enter our kind of prime building season here. So it's great to be ahead of the curve on that. As far as our SAIDI and safety targets, we've met all of our goals for May. We did have 45 unplanned outages, most of which were due to weather or animals this time. So we've moved away from the dump truck driving and more into the animal zone. But we always make improvements when we have sort of natural occurring incidents. We've had some new fencing and new protections that we've put up to sort of anticipate potential animal-caused outages, especially around some of our substations. Kirsten, I see your hand up again.
Yes, thank you. Concerning the capital projects and the 32% at the end of March, given that it's June, do we have any April data, or do we just collect this quarterly?
I think that might be a typo, right?
Yep, that's typo.
That should be May. I'm sorry. Think appreciate the calling us out on that, but yeah, that should be May.
Okay, so then if it's May, then we're not ahead. It's 32%, 512.
Okay.
So Kirsten, it's it's not linear according to month by month, just because we have the winter months, but for where we expected to be at this point, we are moving along a little better than expected.
Okay. So it's from where expected, not necessarily linear.
Yeah.
And I heard Graham say it's not linear before, but he was also saying this means we're ahead. Good to be ahead because it's going to speed up, or whatever it was. So let's just be cautious that we're ahead, but we may not be as ahead as we thought.
We're probably returning back towards the norm, but still slightly ahead, I guess, as opposed to earlier in the year where we were far ahead. Thanks for clarifying that. All right. We'll have a slight update perhaps in executive session on the power supply strategy, but obviously we had quite a lengthy committee of the whole meeting on that where we really delved into that topic for this month, and continue to pursue local clean power projects. Obviously for the end of May, we were buttoning up the sort of end of the community solar program at Sunnyside to be ready for the grand unveiling that all of you were able to attend last week. And I think that was a pretty great event, and I'm glad everybody could make it to us, and it's a great indicator of our future and where we're headed. Any other questions on this slide? Oh, Joe.
Yeah, since I missed that tour, if there's any chance that staff or something is going out there with someone else to show it, I'd appreciate if you give me a call. I'd love to go out there and see it myself too.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, I'm sorry you weren't feeling well that day, but yeah, we can probably make something like that happen for you. Anything else? All right, let's go to the next slide. Be a trusted community partner. So this is fun part for me because I get to call out all of the great stuff that staff is doing throughout the cooperative to get out and engage with our community. So one of our targets, of course, is to achieve improvement in overall member satisfaction. And Amanda Williamson hosted a budget billing webinar that had about 65 people attend. Seems like a pretty strong attendance number. So great to Amanda for getting that taken care of and pulling off such a well-attended event. Let's see that strengthening partnerships and increasing stakeholder engagement. Obviously, we've got the list of our, you know, different attendances. I was able to get over to Pagosa Springs, which was great. Got to meet a lot of really nice people, and I hear a lot of great feedback about our operations department over in Pagosa Springs. A lot of members were really happy with the way our operations working hard to keep the lights on over there. John Kenny had an in-person contractor training for air to hot water heat pump technology. 35 contractors attended, so well attended by John. Great job pulling that off. Emily Misseldine presented at Leadership La Plata on how customers can directly participate in the energy transition through beneficial electrification and distributed energy resources. And I've had some interest from the board on perhaps Emily being able to represent that in a few different forums. So we'll continue to kind of look into what opportunities we have for that. And then Jerry, Carrie Hugas, and Evan Moore all attended the Hire Me Fair at Bayfield High School to highlight our line worker scholarship opportunities. And we have sort of filled up our line worker scholarships, and they've all been granted through our scholarship committee. So take a break here. I got Joe on the top of my list. I was sort of
I just had two questions on the first of all on the budget billing webinar. How was that publicized? I didn't see or hear anything about that. I just wondered, was that on WhatsApp or?
Patrick, do you have insight into how that was publicized?
I'll probably have to defer to Amanda on that. She's more on that communication end. Yeah.
Joe, you're correct. That was included within WhatsApp.
Okay, and for some reason I'm still not getting the WhatsApp thing, so we'll have to talk about that. Okay, thanks. And then the second question on the that first item, that we went to a large key account with Colorado Department of Energy representative. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I guess what was the purpose? What do we kind of do with those key accounts? Are we talking about efficiency, rooftop solar, or what?
That's a great question, Joe. I'd have the rest of that discussion in an executive session, probably, just because we don't really have don't want to talk about individual members specifically at the meetings, right? And even though it's a commercial member rather than a residential member, we just need to apply that across the board. So I'm happy to sort of field some more detailed questions about that in executive.
Okay, can we add that at this point to the?
Yeah, we can bring that up. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Tim, I see you're next on my list.
Yeah, was that budget billing webinar? Well, first, I'm glad that you had that, and I wonder if it's recorded so that it could be posted on the website. People could go see it without having to attend.
Tim, it was recorded, and we will be posting it.
Okay. Yeah, if you can let us know, that would be great, because
I'd be happy to
share it with some people. Thanks much.
You're welcome.
All right, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you, Graham. This is such a great slide to see, and just exciting to see, I think, all of this member engagement in myriad forms in multiple seemingly two-way formats. And I was just curious, kind of overall, if I don't know, it seems, I know you all got strong cues from us, like, let's do more two-way engagement with the membership. And so if there's any big takeaways or improvements or different ways y'all are identifying to do things through all of these different community engagements.
I'll be frank, that's probably a decent amount of this stuff was always going on, and we maybe just weren't quite reporting it to the board in that sort of way. I mean, definitely we've got great community engagement staff who's out there, and so some of that might just been an internal reporting visibility of, oh yeah, these are the kinds of things that we can let the board know about, right? That and so and as far as I guess your question is like, what are we sort of learning from the members? I can sort of speak to myself personally from my time over in Pagosa Springs that I got a lot of really diverse questions on everything from budget billing to electric vehicles. I mean, I took the Tesla over there, and so I kind of got a lot of questions about that, and a lot of you know, but honestly, a lot of what I heard there was just a lot of satisfaction with the operations department and how people are doing their job over there. So, there were, I exchanged business cards with a few people. I gave them my information to kind of follow up with me on some additional stuff, or kind of point them in the direction of, like our budget billing information and stuff like that. But honestly, most of the people I was able to talk to had nice things to say to us instead of questions. So maybe that was an easy opportunity. I'll have harder ones in the future, but yeah. And then as you kind of see a lot of these as, obviously, if we go down through this, the one we've really identified as a two-way communication is the GRIP teams, heat pump rebate recipients to understand their experience, inform rebate process improvements, tailor heat pump educational events, and explore launching electrification forums for members. So, and we've got some follow-up that we've taken away from that. I don't know the specific data on that myself, but I mean, you can see the next steps that they're taking based on that two-way communication. You can sort of see a lot of these are sort of actually aimed at some of our youth in our community, right? Trying to get people the Hire Me Fair out of Bayfield High School, try and get people interested in careers with us. And then obviously all the safety outreach and the great positive connections in the community throughout that, the safety days and safety month programs. People spend a lot of time and effort communicating with the youth in our community on a safety basis.
Awesome. Thanks, Graham. Yeah,
Yep.
I think I was more so like gone in for process improvements, but
Yeah.
no worries there. I appreciate that overview. And then just I wouldn't want this to get swept under the rug. Just a huge thank you to Amanda and her team for getting us that communications strategy and plan. I know we've been asking for it for a long time. And I know Amanda, you listed some questions, like understandable questions, like, hey, I'm looking for content on this. And I didn't know when or where we're doing that. I do want to cue this up as something to think about for our board, and how, like, if we're doing things over email, right, you might hear from each of us individually, but it's really hard to get to consensus, which I could see being challenging for anyone to understand. Like, well, one board member said this, so is that all the board? Like, so I don't know. Just thinking about that, if there are things like, hey, Amanda needs a really concise package of what we're looking for, probably a better venues in conversation where we can get to that place versus email. And so I don't know if Amanda got what she needed for that. I know some of the timeframes said launching in June. So I didn't see in our agenda, didn't know, thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, no, I think it's something, and especially as we sort of move towards the focus groups, right? We're going to need some feedback from the board on what specific questions and what specific information the board is looking for on that. So we'll find a way to follow up with the board as soon as we can to try and tailor that those questions and the surveys and the focus groups as a very specific two-way communication tool as soon as we can. So it was important to kind of get through that initial strategic planning session. That would help us get some guidance, and then we'll sort of like, as a sort of next step from that, move towards those specific questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. And that does. And I guess just my point is, if there's being thoughtful in how we do it, because So you're not getting pulled all over the place and
Yeah,
you're getting useful information. Yeah.
no, really appreciate
Thanks.
that.
And then I just want to throw it out that budget billing webinar is such a, you're probably, like you said, you've probably been doing these for a long time. And I don't know if it'd be helpful or of interest, but it seems like partnering with some of the groups like Housing Solutions in Southwest and some of the folks working with people struggling on basic needs could be great partnerships to get that information to people who could really also benefit from that. If you're not doing it already, happy to give connections or introductions.
Thanks. Take a note of that. Kirsten.
Yeah, add Archuleta County Housing Authority to that list that, Rachel started.
Okay.
So, under community partner, I think is probably the best place for me to bring up. It is Juneteenth, which is a federal holiday, and it's a service holiday. So I know that although I consider this service, I think I would have rather been doing other community service. And I am sorry, I didn't even think, because it's so new to my thinking and trying to keep it. I know next year it will not be on a Wednesday, so we don't have to worry about a board meeting being on Juneteenth again, but I think we need to take care of that. I am interested in what, if anything, now I'm interested, first of all, what we as a board should be doing to market, and let's think about this and do it right next year. But I'm also interested, is it a holiday either for the union folks or non-union folks? Is our office open and things like that, Grant? Can you help me with what we're doing with Juneteenth?
We are open. We don't have it as one of our recognized holidays on our holiday list for our employees, either union or non-union. That is, I'm trying to recall what I know that when I came here, we did make some adjustments on some holiday recognition and stuff like that. So we've had to, and also, frankly, since we moved to 410s, we want to make sure that we're available for customers for members as often as possible, realizing that, you know, we're only open 4 days a week, and so we try to be kind of thoughtful about spreading staff holidays around rather than recognizing a holiday on a day when the office would otherwise be closed. And we do some things like that, but I can look into Juneteenth. I can just tell you that I know that we aren't recognizing it as a day off currently.
Thank you. I know we tend to companies tend to drop something off. Frequently, Veterans Day isn't a holiday, and or Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day.
Mm-hmm.
Which one of those do we celebrate both of those?
I know we do Veterans Day. I don't know that we do Indigenous Peoples Day, but I'm gonna try and take a look real quick.
And I can add a little bit of
Okay,
context if
Elizabeth.
you'd like, Graham. Yeah,
Yeah.
our holidays are contractual with the IBEW. So we negotiated our contract with them in 2022. And we did make some adjustments to holidays. We can always update our holiday list, you know, based on what the board feels through a letter of agreement with the IBEW. And if you guys would like, I can post in the chat the 11 holidays that we acknowledge, if you'd like.
As a board member, I'm not interested in influencing that list at all, but I would like to know what that list is.
Sure, I'll get that posted in just a second.
Anything else on this slide? Okay, let's go to the next one. So here are just some photos, primarily of the safety days. It's great to sort of see so many different ways that we can engage with our young members on safety, especially celebrating May as Electric Safety Month. So next slide. Oh, Holly, sorry. You have a question on that slide?
Yeah, thank you for the great pictures and all the work. I'm so grateful for the staff for doing these safety demonstrations for our young members. I am curious, you were talking about our member engagement team is working behind the scenes in a lot of instances, and I'm just kind of curious if work has been done with engaging our Pagosa Springs school districts, because that is something that I've asked for in the past, and the common answer is that since staff works Monday through Thursday and they work the 410s, that most of the school districts need to get together on Fridays, which I can vouch for because I just had a second grader graduate from second grade, and they get together on Fridays. So one of the solutions that I had thought of is if it's possible to say, like in the fall, in the spring, maybe twice a year, saying LPEA Safety Month or Safety Week, I'm sorry, and just organize like some of those for some of my local community groups over here, because I think it's really important to engage the younger members, and they might not ever see anything like this if we don't actively do it. And so it's really important to me, and I really appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. We would absolutely take a note of it. I don't know. Elizabeth, are you familiar with what sort of outreach we've done to school districts in Archuleta County at this point, or?
You know, we have partnered with Archuleta County. We're really trying to, we actually set a goal through our inclusion initiative to make sure that we're reaching out beyond just Durango. So let me get a list from Carrie of everywhere we've been and get that to you all as well.
Thanks. Kirsten.
Yeah, I want to talk about the young members who are in the top left-hand corner wearing hard hats there. The young members are getting older every day. Just saying.
Well, you know, I mean, they all look very young to me, especially the one that's sort of second from the right.
Yeah, exactly. The one with the sunglasses.
The one with the sunglasses. It's probably the sunglasses that make him look so young. All right. Anything else on this? All right, let's go to the next one. Patrick, I'll turn this over to you on this slide.
Good morning, everyone. May was one of those months where we saw a retracement on our performance to budget. And this is obviously something we have talked about in prior months about how we expected some of our positive budget variance to disappear because of timing issues. We're also seeing some pressures from our energy transition where we had some unbudgeted expenses that have impacted the operating statement. And there's also, in the absence of a CEO, there's been a lot of efforts to backfill and recruit and do those things. So those expenses have hit our operating expenses as well, which caused some of that retracement. As far as gross margins are concerned, top line revenue was essentially flat. It was an interesting month from that standpoint. Residential revenue was up 10%, but large industrial was down 18% due to one of our key accounts being closed for maintenance for 5 days. That translated into cost of power being better than budget by $175,000. So gross margins actually were better than budget by $143,757. And operating expenses, as I led with, were worse to budget, getting some inflationary pressures on wages, and then also the items that I just went through caused some of that variance to normalize. This is the first month we've had this negative budget variance, and it was not unexpected. That being said, our operating budgets, actuals to budget variance was $140,791 to the negative. And that translated to essentially us still hitting all our goals for the year. We're still better than budget, and operating expenses by about $360,000. But for me, looking forward, understanding our energy transition strategies, we didn't budget to exit, so we might need to allocate some more resources to those expense line items as we look at what our strategy is going forward. So I think that's something to be aware of from a financial standpoint. Cash position's still good. We look great on that side of the equation. I did take a look at billing accounts, aging versus, and when I say aging, it's basically delinquent accounts, and that is segmented into, are they 30 days delinquent, 60 days delinquent, et cetera. Looking at that as a percentage of our overall receivables billing balance, we're at about 5%, that's a very healthy percentage. That still puts us at what we would consider better performance than you would typically see for this particular metric. So that being said, I will open up for questions.
And Patrick, I'll let you go ahead. Can you see everyone, or do you need me to call on them for you?
I can see Tim and Rachel both have their hands up. I wasn't sure, and Joe as well, so I wasn't sure who had theirs up first.
Usually on your screen, the top one is the first one.
Okay. That would be you, Tim.
All right, thank you. That wasn't my question. Is this a good time to talk about the financial specifics, or the ones that are included at the end of the board packet?
That would be my expectation, yeah.
Okay, I just want to verify I'm not wandering off someplace. So I'm on page 57, at least in my packet of 66, which is page 4 of the financials. And the, excuse me, the non-operating margins, below the operating margins. That's a big variance there. Is that?
That is from deferred revenue from the transaction we executed at year end with our subsidiary.
Okay, I thought so. I just wanted to verify that.
And we can go into greater detail if you'd like to in executive.
No, I just wanted to verify that that's my understanding of what it was. And then there's G&T capital credits. So is that the allocation that they made for us?
That's correct. That came in late, so that's hitting in 2024.
Great. We had anticipated none, right? So that's a positive.
That's a positive budget variance, correct.
And then there's a new slide, at least new to me, at the end, about LPEA actual and projected carbon emissions. And I think maybe we had asked for that or something a month or so ago. Is that something we can expect each month, or when? I really like this. I think it's really helpful.
I think it's going to be quarterly, right, Dan? What's the cadence on that?
We only get updated carbon emission data annually from Tri-State. So that's an annual report that goes in there. Usually we get that in May. Sometimes we don't get it until June. So it's either going to be the June or July board packet that this will show up.
Okay. And have we seen that before? It seems new to me, but
I think we've had it in there once before.
Okay. All right. So it's a yearly thing. Once a year we get that. And yeah, I haven't had time to really pour into it, so I may have questions later, but maybe not. It's pretty self-explanatory, and I appreciate that. Thanks much. That's all I have. Thank you.
Joe, you are next in line, as I see.
Yeah, I've never understood why, it seems like all the numbers that are at the bottom of the report should be right after your summary here in the, in this part of the presentation. I'm just curious, any reason why we have them way down there instead of up here where they're just a little easier to kind of go back and forth with?
The detailed financials?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that?
I was just saying he's talking about it being in the appendix as opposed to
yeah. And so I mean, we've typically had sort of, I guess, a cascading level of detail, right? We have this public slide where we report publicly on the board's metrics, and then we have so a sort of abbreviated appendix on the dashboard that that's
right. Yeah, I just wonder why. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me to, we get the financial report and then we have to go all the way past CRAA and Tri-State and WUI and all that stuff down to the bottom to see the thing. So, I mean, it's not a big deal. I'm just wondering if there was some particular reason why it's set up in the layout that way. So, anyway, if anyone wants to look at that. And then the other question, so we're going to have a discussion about capital credits later. Is that correct? Or
a bit? We have it won't be exactly as we'd anticipated. The Finance and Audit Committee will have an update that will touch on capital credits.
Okay, I've got a question. I'll wait for that later. Thanks.
Okay.
Rachel.
Yeah, thanks. I was curious, you mentioned both in the written report and your verbal report that wage increases hit us this month, and I'm curious, so that will be the case moving forward, and were these anticipated wage increases and thus reflected kind of in the initial budget, or and if not, yeah, how much of a concern or difference is this than what we had anticipated?
It wasn't a huge difference in what we anticipated. I'm estimating around 50 basis points as a variance that would be negative budget margin, but we have seen some savings in some other accounts that it would offset that, but it's a complicated mix at this point in the game because we are seeing pressure from outside consultants that we would see what I would anticipate would be greater than budget operating variance. So it wasn't a huge amount, but I would consider this part of inflationary pressures that you're seeing that are now flowing through from wage negotiations. It's been, I think, 3 years, correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth or Graham, but since we've had a wage negotiation of this nature, and from a metric standpoint, where we ended up landing when we look at some of the changes that have happened in other co-ops, we are in, I would consider, right in line with the adjustments across the industry, which keeps us as a competitive hirer.
Awesome. So just to quickly clarify, so you are including consultant fees in wages? No. Okay, so Graham saying no. Okay, and then the other part is you're saying, so we are done with our IBW negotiations, and this is reflecting that.
That's correct.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the financials? All right, thank you, Patrick. Go to the next slide, Drew. Prepare for the future. All right. We've, as far as broadband goal, we've continued to work with the various broadband providers in the area to sort of have a unified attachment process and agreed terms. I think it's been a lot of effort on our staff part to sort of make that standardized in a way that works well for both the cooperative and for the attachers, and try and streamline that process as much as possible. I really appreciate the level of effort that's gone into that. The thing I'm really excited about announcing is LPEA piloting a new Berkeley lab tool, LODGE, Least Cost Optimal Distribution Grid Expansion, which is going to use some of our system data to identify cost optimal grid points for interconnecting community solar and storage. And the goal is to lower our costs for developers and promote distributed energy generation and storage deployment. Tim, so you have a question.
I can wait if you want, but it's up to you.
And then I would just sort of go over also, we're working with the town of Pagosa Springs and NREL to look at an analysis of a new solar array. And then under that, I just sort of refer to the grant tracking on the right, for sort of where we are on awarded and pending and in progress. Happy to answer happy to address your question, Tim.
Yeah, one thing that there's three things I wanted to comment on. One was pole attachment agreement terms, right? And I know there's a lot of work being done by staff to, I guess, streamline some of that. I still attend the Southwest Broadband, committee monthly webinar, or not webinar, but Zoom meeting. And one of the providers mentioned that, again, that they felt that that their customer service staff, I think this came up last month by one of our directors asking about it, and they pointed to LPEA's pole attachment as being a delay, and I asked them to clarify that, and they said that there was a third party in between that they felt wasn't LPEA. There was a third party in between that maybe was slower, and that they felt that lots of progress had been made recently in a meeting with LPEA staff. So I don't want to get real specific, but I just want to point out that I think there's a recognition, even other customer service staff might have pointed to us, that maybe there's some other aspect of this, and that they're working, they thought, well with LPEA to address that. And I wanted to just pass that on, that it might be worth talking to them again about that third party or whatever, I just didn't want this group to walk away with the idea that LPEA was holding things up if that was not the case, right? And I noticed that, frankly, there's no one else from LPEA that shows up at those anymore. I think they're still valuable, especially as we move into the large $800 million worth of BEAD funding that's coming into Colorado here. So I would ask that maybe that could be, there could be other participation by staff. I try not to provide any kind of input as a director. I just tell them I'm a fly on the wall to hear this stuff. Second thing was the lodge. It says something about interconnecting community solar and storage, and I wonder if there's any application there to net metered rooftop solar. And if so, I hope it can help the issue that we are in, where there's engineering needs to have a moratorium. So I don't know if that's the case or not, but if not, it would be good to know that. This says only community solar and storage, which that's great as well. But
I believe it is limited to that, but I also believe Dan is in progress of acquiring an additional consultant for information that's more specific to your question about interconnecting rooftop solar, and that should be coming out shortly, right, Dan?
Yeah, and we keep I'll say tweaking this lodge grant to meet our needs as needs come up, and so we keep sort of channeling them. It's like, well, can you take it down to the layer of the substation, and can we backfeed through this? So we are trying to leverage lodge for that exact point, Tim. And if I don't expect quite the detail that we'll need out of lodge, and so we are still seeking other third parties to help us with that as well.
Great. I'm glad you're trying to leverage every point you can, Dan. I appreciate
We got it.
And then finally, I noticed just got red press in the last day or two about like DMEA getting, I think it was a large PACE grant or a very large, I'm not sure, USDA grant. There's a lot of them out there for like, I don't know, $75 million or something like that. And I don't know if that, reading that, I thought, does that mean that some that we have as pending or hopeful, does that have any relationship? Did they get it and we didn't, or are we still pending? And this is about grant tracking, so I'm going to ask that question now. So is there any relationship, I guess?
Yeah. Tim, we haven't heard anything back on the New Era grant yet. Of course, we've heard our good news on PACE.
Right.
So that's part of it. I haven't looked at DMEA's award yet to see which one that fell into.
Okay.
And if we, whether I should take that as news of if we haven't heard anything, then it's probably not favorable. So we'll dig into that a little more.
Okay, yeah, when you do, it'd be nice to get an understanding of that. When there is some conclusion that we can draw. I appreciate that. Thanks, that's all I have. Appreciate your work.
All right, Kirsten is next on my list.
In the next few months, can we see a 5-minute show and tell on Lodge? And can it be public? During the public part of our meeting?
Yeah, Kirsten, I think once we have something to show, that would be a good thing to do. And we'll ask the Berkeley Lab guys if it can be public or not.
Super, thank you.
Any other questions on this slide? Any questions on the appendix? All right. Well, I'll always take wrapping up this 8 minutes ahead of schedule. So I don't know if Ted, we want to have our break now and come back in a few minutes, or if we want to.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and crank back up let's go 5 after the hour. See you guys back here, and we'll move into the board action section of the agenda. Okay, let's crank up again. We're agenda item 5, board action. First item is Finance and Audit Committee update. I'll let you take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Ted. Okay, so the written report is in the board packet. Didn't have really any review of the April financials because we covered them well back in May. May financials, as Patrick just presented, there's no changes between what was at the board, or excuse me, the FAC meeting or at the board meeting here. And we had a great presentation on the retirement of capital credits. There was a proposals to do a full retirement of the 2003 allocation, which is a 20-year in the past, a 20-year retirement schedule. In 2003, there were no G&T capital credits, so that wasn't necessary to be retired. And the committee had a great discussion about whether or not we should do not just an all first in, first out, which would retire the 2003 full LPEA, but also include a percentage of what's called a last in, first out. So these are generally accepted terms, FIFO, LIFO. In the finance world, they're also, just as an aside, also used in computer architecture as well. So not to be confused with computer architecture here. Drew's got a smile there. And anyway, the discussion went on about, one, what is the value of cash value that we can afford? And that was around 3 million, give or take a little bit. And that retiring things on a 20-year basis is good, but it's not necessary or critical, or it's not a requirement, I guess, is a better way to put it. And that if you do all FIFO, all often there are maybe inactive members in there, that there's the benefit of seeing your cooperative capital credit allocation retirement for current or relatively new members versus members from 20 years ago. What's the value of that? And then there's a kind of a question about whether, you know, how many does that really affect in terms of active members right now? So we talked about maybe a 75-25, 80-20, and in the end decided that we would like to see more information in the July FAC to discuss this before we made a recommendation to the board for action in July. Staff, Graham, reminded us that we're trying to inform members of our allocation and retirement in the same announcement, such that it's a little less confusing, we believe. So we don't want to go past July, but the plan is to bring one, a recommendation from the FAC in July, so that it can be acted on by the board then. So I'll pause there, see if anyone has any questions. Kirsten?
Yeah, I have an opinion on the announcing it at the same time, whether it's more confusion or whether it's more opportunities to educate. And I think the more often we talk about it, it might be better. That's an opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that we did this last year. We had a discussion last year about the timing, and we agreed on something. So we're just carrying out that agreement. So, Joe?
I'm not sure if this is the right time for this, but you know, given what we're going up against with our buyout here, how do we, I mean, I guess my question is, number one is, are we legally obligated to make these capital credits? I guess my feeling is, you know, people getting a couple $100 from something that happened 20 years ago. It seems like we're better off trying to save that money, and I think that's in our role to say, hey, if we think we can use that money in a better way for the co-op, that, you know, we don't pay out the capital credit. So maybe, you know, I don't have a good understanding of that, but and I don't know if this is a you know, a philosophical discussion for later or what, but I'm just kind of confused about, you know, money going out at this point when we're looking at a, you know, pretty big bill coming up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'll take a crack, and then Graham, you can assist me unless you'd rather.
I mean, I was just going to say the general rule, right, is that we have to retire these sooner or later. So not necessarily sooner rather than later, sooner or later. They've been allocated to the members, and at some point we have to give them back. But what that point is, under our bylaws, the board has great discretion to analyze the overall financial health of the cooperative and make that as a discretionary decision on any kind of given retirement schedule. Does that lead into some of your comments, Tim?
Yeah, that's really helpful. I would just say this, Joe, that and we discussed this at the FAC as well. That same question came up, so it's a good one. And essentially, there doesn't seem to be a statutory requirement that we have to retire them at 20 years, for example, right? But that the longer we go without retiring them, the more risk, I guess, there is of someone, you know, a member or group of members or whatever, demanding it. It's sort of like if you're a company and you withhold the dividends to your shareholders, at some point, you know, the shareholders are going to say, where's my dividend, right? And this is money that was allocated 20 years ago. We owe it to the members. There's no question of that. And we've been trying to get to a reasonable 20-year, which, you know, is a pretty standard or typical, I would say, retirement schedule. And we've made great progress. but we have also done this on a split FIFO, LIFO basis many times over the course of the history. And there's a strong argument to be said, some portion of FIFO is really beneficial to the co-op. And it also provides an educational opportunity to say to the people who are new, you know, you move here from somewhere and you get a join up and you know, you don't understand necessarily the basis of a cooperative business, right? You came here from a municipal utility or IOU, investor-owned utility or something. And so there's an opportunity there. There's also, there's some good financial reasons for that too. So I hope that helps your understanding.
Yeah, again, I just, you know, we are looking at a big bill coming up. So however we can work that, I guess, is I don't quite understand the whole capital credit thing is interesting, but anyway, just wanted to raise that concern. Thank you.
All right, sounds like you still have questions. I'll be happy to talk to you later if you want. Rachel, excuse me, Kirsten.
Yeah, Joe, one of the things you said is this the time to be sending money out? This money was sent out 20 years ago when we allocated. Right now, it's figuring out your cash position and can we do it from a cash point. This is money that basically our members lent to us, and at some point we do need to pay it back. And when we look at that, right now our cash reserves are at 18%. And our target is between 12 and 20%. Do we have too much cash? Is it time to consider that? Our equity percentage range is 40 to 55%, and we're at 54%. So do we want to retire more equity? Do we want to bring on more equity? That type of stuff. And then our long-term debt. And I think we should consider capital credits a version of long-term debt. So Tim and the FAC has done a great job at looking at all those financials and figuring out, and that's what should be driving both the amount of that we're going to retire, and then it's more the philosophy of who gets impacted, how many of our members are we able to affect it in the form of retirement. That would be the LIFO, FIFO. But this money has already been allocated. This isn't something that's going to change our balance sheet. Well, it changes our cash flow, but it doesn't change our balance sheet. By retiring 2020.
Kirsten, can I make a couple additions or corrections there? One, it will affect the balance sheet if you retire this. It will reduce the liability. And yes, you're right, it is allocated. The other thing is this is not a loan. These are not loans. This is not debt. It is equity. And there is a significant difference there. So this is the equivalent of, ownership like in a house or whatever, right? You have that. And so, you know, the longer we hold on to it, you know, the more it accumulates, and then we're going to have to pay at some point anyway, right? Nicole, I think you're next, please.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question that Joe brought up, and we spent a lot of time discussing it at the FAC, particularly that, you know, we say 20 years. We asked about kind of legal standing on the back end of how long that can be. The answer we got was no more than 30 years. Then you start to face some challenges on that. But, you know, obviously, Kirsten, this is members' money and we need to pay it back, but it is within our discretion to use it as we see fit, and kind of using that metaphor, playing off that metaphor, Tim, you said with equity, like owning a house. You know, do we upgrade the bathroom so that we can, you know, sell the house for more with that equity? So one thing, Joe, though, we talked about that I'd love for Patrick to weigh in here on is that there's some financial reasons why we can't just keep putting more money into the rate stabilization fund, because that's what we had sort of talked about is, do we want to keep growing that balance? And Patrick, do you remember when you kind of talked about that briefly? And I
I
think that's a
do.
relevant discussion.
Yeah, this is an important strategic conversation to have about rate stabilization. Rate stabilization is going to be used to offset potential rate increases for members. In the absence of having a cash position that backs that, you're running a deficit that is funded by the liability side of the financial statements. It's similar to what other organizations have gotten themselves in trouble by just moving things around and not having the cash behind it. It will be important to have a good, solid cash position and managing rate stabilization in a way that is in symphony with cash to avoid running into line of credit and taking out more debt. And I don't know if I need to expand on that, please let me know, or if that's unclear, I can help clarify a bit, but that's the strategy behind rate stabilization. We want to be very precise on that if we can.
Right. So just to repeat what I heard you say is that we can increase a rate stabilization fund, but we have to have the cash behind it. So retirement affects only cash, right? At this point, right? It doesn't affect what we have allocated or have allocated. It doesn't come out of margins. And I've heard that a couple times in this conversation.
That's
right?
correct.
So so just to be sure, right? This is an allocation that was made 20 years ago. It needs to be paid at some point. The question is, at what point is it best from a cash perspective? Because when you make that retirement, you have to pay out real funds, real cash, right? And if and in our discussion at the FAC, we did talk about increasing the rate stabilization fund, but that would be, and there's a resolution coming up, we haven't gotten to that yet, that would be in association with the pass-through rate, of which that margin has not been allocated yet. So there is still room to do something there. So just to make that clarification. Did I say anything wrong there, Patrick? Okay.
No, I thought that was great. The only other, I have one other comment on this, and for me, when you think about returning the equity to the members, you don't want to just defer that, right? And there's been great conversation about the term that, what's the aging, so to speak, how long have these been sitting there? To use a metaphor that gets used around here, often dry powder, right? So perhaps you do a pause on retirement in 2026, 2027, maybe 2025, when we have a clearer picture about what our power strategy is and what that cost structure looks like. So that's just additional type of logic that is brought to the table when making this decision.
Thank you. Kohler, I'm sorry to make you wait. Go ahead, please.
No problem. And I hope to bring this up at the next FAC meeting. I hope to be there. But I wanted to just kind of bring this out. And that is as far as the LIFO and the FIFO. I believe that when we do go forward, that we should pay FIFO completely and not do LIFO. There was a spreadsheet that was presented at the FAC meeting, and what it showed is what we have allocated through the years. And that spreadsheet also had, in a couple of years, what we've also allocated as far as tri-state's patronage capital. After we do our buyout of our contract, we are completely responsible for that. And it's going to go from roughly $3 million a year, almost double that. And the older that gets, I think the more problems you're going to have with members. And I do believe that these members, 20 years ago, and to be honest, I'm one of them. But I think they need to get paid off before someone that hasn't been there that long should be. And I also don't want it to build up on that back end. So I will bring this up at the FAC meeting, but I wanted to mention it today in case I missed the FAC meeting. Thank you.
Right. And we're hoping to get some analysis about how many members are affected by either. so that we have some other data to talk about at that FAC meeting. So if you're interested in this, that'd be a good place to show up next month. Appreciate the comments. John? Witchell?
I think we are at a moment in time where, and it's short, I mean, I think we're thinking 6 months here, 9 months, where it is the right thing to do is to be as conservative with sending cash out the door as possible in most matters. And I think that we are going to be in a better position in 6 or 9 months to make good decisions about capital retirements. But I think at this exact moment, given all the uncertainty that we have, interim CEO, operational expenses in this year while we do all the planning for power supply itself, capital projects like Sunnyside. I don't think it's going to take a ton of time to have a lot more information, and I think that additional information will give us confidence in our decision making. So my 2 cents on this matter is that we should try to defer any decisions here until basically towards the end of this year, and we still may be able to squeeze it in this calendar year, or maybe Q1 of next year at the latest. But I think we buy ourselves a little bit of time here. We'll have a lot more information to make good decisions. Thank you.
All right, thanks. There's another topic coming up here that discusses some further use of cash here. So unless anyone has further discussions, we already agreed the FAC would take this up in July. We got the input from the board at this point. You can all attend the FAC in July. We hope to make some recommendation that could be acted on in July board meeting. If at that time people want to defer it, that's up to the board. But this next discussion, which came out of our executive session, is somewhat germane to that. It's certainly in terms of cash, right? One other thing, just as a note in the report, you saw that, but the FAC will be a 3-hour standing meeting henceforth until further notice. We figured it was better to block the time should we need it, and we have been needing it lately, rather than asking people to go over. So just note that if we get done early, that's always good, I guess. So we had several topics in the executive session. All of them were very lively discussions. There's nobody shy on this committee, nor are the members who attend, and other board directors, I should say, that attend. And out of that, we had a discussion on essentially the tri-state rate increase refiling, I should say, at FERC that occurred in June, I believe, for, and this is public, that Tri-State refiled their rate increase, but they made it they're asking it to be made effective July 1st rather than January 1st. And so we, back in 2023, voted to raise our rates to accommodate a pass-through increase, such that we were not adding necessarily to our distribution margin, but that our plan was to have a rate increase that accommodated purely a pass-through. So Tri-State raised a plan to raise in January of 2024, January 1st. Their rates about 6.4% or something, and then we had about a 4% increase. That would be the pass-through for that additional cost of power, right? And Tri-State fumbled their FERC filing and had to refile, which is now July 1st. They're requesting a July 1st effective date. So we have accumulated funds from that pass-through increase so far for the first 6 months. It could be longer, given when FERC files and what they file or what they approve, or with respect to that. And so we, as the FAC, having a long discussion on this, essentially indicated that we feel that we should utilize that additional cash funding from our members in two ways. One is to allocate that to the rate stabilization fund. We will have the cash to do so, and hopefully be able to preserve that as we go forward. And then consider a split of some of that as a FIFO. That's for current members who have paid this increase, rather than FIFO for 20 years back for people who did not pay it, in such a way that, and do so with giving the discretion to the finance department to make that call, right? So that split between rate stabilization and FIFO capital credit return retirement, I should say, in 2025 based on 2024, right? So I'm going to pause there just to see if anybody has a question about what we are recommending first.
And Tim, do you want me to show the resolution?
That would be really helpful. Thank you, Graham. Ted, you have a question? You have a hand up.
Yeah, no, just quick clarification that you are specifically talking about LIFO here. That if we split this between rate stabilization and some retirement, it would be the last in, first out type of retirement.
That's absolutely correct. For 2024. So we would specifically target the I would say increased funds we received from the pass-through that we did not have to pay to Tri-State until their new formula rate goes into effect, and split it between rate stabilization, which is similar to what John was saying a moment ago. Put some more cash into the fund that will help us through this transition, and at the same time bring back to the members who have paid that in 2024 some proportion of capital credit. And that actual split, we left that to the finance department to decide, rather than coming back here to discuss it again. Does that answer your question there, Ted? Kohler?
So there's not going to be a motion on this since it's a recommendation. So are we in discussion of this actual resolution now? Can I bring up what I would like to?
Yes, I mean, the FAC made this recommendation, which resulted in this this resolution. And so, yes, we're at that point. And since the committee made the recommendation, it's essentially a motion.
Okay, so what I would like to do is make an amendment to this. And if I get a second, I'll give you my reasoning behind it. But under now, therefore, be it resolved, with the paragraph starting with any, I would like to change that to any funds collected for the needs of the tri-state pass-through rate increase shall be allocated as a 2024 LIFO, last in, first out, capital credit requirement, be included in the general capital credit retirements during the 2025 retirement cycle. I'm not in favor of the split. And I will discuss that further if I get a second. Thank you.
Do we have a second on Kohler's amendment?
Dan seconds.
Dan second, okay. So now we have a subsidiary motion and we're discussing. So Kohler, let me get the language correct. So you said any funds.
Any,
I think he struck between rate stabilization and.
So that's basically.
No, up above. I think he, correct me if I'm wrong, Cole, you're saying don't include rate stabilization in this.
Okay.
That's correct.
Shall be allocated. Okay.
Well, you probably actually, a rate increase, so shall be allocated is maybe even not necessary. Anyway, I don't care, but yeah, he's trying to remove the rate stabilization component. Is that correct?
100% goes to a LIFO retirement next year.
That's what I'm after, and then I put a period after the parentheses after cycle in the second.
That would,
right there.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So Kohler, you said if you got a second, you would explain why you wanted to do this. So why don't you do that, please?
So I've been to at least 2 public meetings in which our former CEO stated very clearly and very firmly that this increase in the tariff was strictly for a pass-through from the tri-state increase. And when I have spoken to the members myself, I told them the same thing. And I think that since it didn't go to that, and we're so specific on it, that the whole thing should be refunded to those that did pay it. I think it builds trust. And I also think that it's harmful for some of these members that might have paid it. And then if it goes into the rate stabilization, that might not be used for a couple of years. They may no longer be a member and don't get the advantage of something that they paid, that they were specifically told to go to a certain thing. So that's my reasoning behind it. I do think it should be fully refunded to the members. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. Kirsten, you're next.
Yeah, Kohler, I echo this is what we told the members. We told the members it was because of the tri-state rate increase, and that certainly was the main rate pressure that made that happen. On the other hand, and why I would like to see at least the holding out the possibility of rate stabilization is we don't know where we're going to be at the end of the year. Committing ourselves now to it has to be just cash out and not go into rate stabilization, I think is a little premature. I would certainly encourage us at the end of the year to look at the finances really hard and say, no, you guys, we really need to do this more 2024. It is the members' money. How can we best help the members who kind of overpaid that first 6 months out of the year? And part of that is getting them their money back as soon as possible. And part of it is also keeping as healthy as we can. So I don't want to support the taking out the rate stabilization, but I really appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, all great points. I'm curious, reflecting back on what John Mitchell mentioned, is this resolution something we have to pass today, or can we sit on this and bring it back up when we get in a position where we have a better sense of what our needs are?
Well, I mean, that's the will of the board. The board can choose to not take action, or they can choose to take action. I don't think there's nothing statutory that says we have to decide this.
This is a wholly discretionary decision, so it's not anything that has to happen today.
So, okay, did you get your answer?
Yeah, I think, and then the just follow-up question there would be, if we were to pass this today, what is the timeline that this would be brought back around?
What do you mean brought back around? It would be a decision and it would be acted on by the finance department.
When would the finance department act on it? Excuse me.
They would probably, I can't speak for Patrick, but my anticipation is we would have to do this before the end of the year because we are going to take some revenue and put it into rate stabilization. We've always had to do that before I think last year we did it at the very end of December because otherwise it will go in to margins and then those will be allocated in 2025. So then we will owe them to the members 20 years from now, or roughly. Does that?
Yeah, and it actually helped clarify my question. So if we pass this, whether today or if we pass this, we are handing over that decision of how to parse out funds to Patrick. Therefore, if we have any strong feelings one way or the other, that needs to either be voiced, included in this, or yeah, I guess this is our moment, is what I'm hearing. If we have some strong feelings about how this should be used.
Yes, I think that's a good take. I mean, again, the board can decide not to act, and then if we don't act at all, any of these funds will not get returned to the members for 20 years because they'll go into margins. That's a important thing. We're trying to forestall getting to the end of the year and having to make a last minute decision.
Say that again, Tim, for clarity. Can you expand on that?
So if we do not make a decision, then any of this that goes to margins will be allocated to members, which will be paid roughly 20 years from now. We would not have the for rate stabilization fund, nor would we have a 2024 LIFO. So, you know, it's important to make a decision on this. Does it have to be done today? Graham has already indicated that's discretionary. If we don't do anything by the end of the year, then that's what will happen. And I'm going to let Patrick go ahead, everybody, because I think he probably wants to clarify something I said.
That's correct, Tim, just to make sure I'm understanding. So if it flows through to margins, the only way it gets passed through to be retired is assuming it's excess margin. If we're off target, we have excess spending, that would cut into that margin and what gets allocated, just to give a little bit further clarity. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio.
That's right.
Depending on what unfolds for the rest of the year.
Right. But if we make the decision now, we take it out at its full value, if you will. Right. So we could end up with a lower margin because we wouldn't have that as revenue to add to the margin. That's somewhere along the way, right? So if we go over in expenses, could be less money allocated to the members. Is that correct, Patrick? Okay. All right. So that was a clarification. Nicole?
Sure. So just to give a little color to how this was decided or recommended in the FAQ, it's sort of, we had reached this consensus that we wanted some kind of split, and we thought but we don't know what the split's going to be at this point in the fiscal year. So let's just put this resolution out there and empower the finance department to make this, to determine what the most advantageous split was. Hearing this discussion has kind of made me rethink if maybe the resolution is either just forestalled or we amend it to be a recommendation that the finance department comes back to us on what that split would be in December at the end of the year. So that obviously would be a different amendment than what's being considered now, but I think it's an option we could consider. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you meant by amendment. This is a resolution.
So amend the motion or amend the resolution.
Okay, all right. Okay,
yeah.
Thanks. Is that all? Okay, John, which one?
So to put a finer point on my earlier comment, I think that there are, at least to me, 4 key questions that we can resolve in the next few months, or at least have significant clarity on, that will allow us to make a better informed decision. Number one is, Patrick is talking to banks about credit and our optionality around debt. And part of that calculus is debt to equity. And so being flush with cash during those discussions is valuable. And then once he gets clarity on that in the coming months, we'll be able to make more precise decisions there. So that's number one. Number two, I think when we have the final buyout price locked down, not the estimated buyout price, I think that will be very instructive to us to make good decisions around capital credits. Number three, we all know that we're going to have significant one-time costs associated with the power supply and the buyout. Those are going to be legal costs, analytical costs, and so on. Again, that's going to be a lot more clear in the coming months. And so again, being cash flush and having optionality there, I think is high value. And then the last piece of it is slightly more subjective, which is we're adding one more moving part to the finance team, one more deliverable at a moment in time where they have a lot of moving parts and a lot of time-sensitive deliverables just from good management. If we don't have to push this deliverable onto them at this moment in time, I think 3 to 6 months would be welcome from that team. So to summarize, being flush with cash during credit negotiations, knowing the final buyout price, knowing the significant one-time costs, and then giving the team breathing room to prioritize some of the decisions are why I would advocate to defer this decision, and sort of at the end of maybe Dan and Kirsten's comments, absent new information, I would like to, and I'm not doing it now, but I would like to make a motion to table the discussion, which is how I think it's the best way to make a decision without making a decision. But I'm open to be told, if there's a better way to do that, please tell me. So those are my comments. Thank you.
So it sounds like you're informing us that you're likely to make a table motion once everybody's done commenting, but you're not making that motion right now.
That's correct.
Well, there's a motion on the table we're discussing.
Yeah, but there's a motion to amend, right? But that motion could be tabled, right? And then the main motion could be addressed and tabled as well, right? So, but it sounds like there isn't currently a motion to table any of this right now.
There is not. I'm trying to have we're trying to have a constructive conversation. I'm not trying to shove something down people's throats.
All right, good clarification. Thank you, Graham. Dan Huntington?
Yeah, just for clarification, these funds that we're talking about right now would be up to the point that FERC approves Tri-State's new rate. That's from January, what we've taken in extra from January 1 till the time that Tri-State gets their new rate, which if they make it July 1, that would be the end date that we would be paying cash back. So it'll just be the 6 months of income.
That's correct, Dan.
Okay, thank you. So that's not going to be a huge amount of money.
At present, do you want to give that number, Patrick?
2 million.
It's about 2
How
million.
much?
2 million.
Just shy of 2 million, 1.9 and change.
Okay, thank you.
Kirsten?
So my understanding is right now we are discussing the amendment, and the amendment is to strike the between rate stabilization portion of the resolution, and I would like to call that question.
So we have call the question. if you don't mind, I'm gonna stop sharing for a little bit just so I can see everyone's hands. It does take a 2/3 vote to have this question called and terminate discussion. So do we have a second on calling the question? Ted Compton seconds. So now we'll proceed immediately to vote on calling the question. We'll have to have a 2/3 supermajority for the question to be called. All right, so all in favor of calling the question, please raise your hand and keep it up while I can keep track of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. So I have 10 out of 11 present directors in favor. All opposed? Of 1 director opposed. That's all votes accounted for. So the question has been called, and we will proceed to a vote on this recommended amendment. So this isn't the approval of the resolution itself, it's just approval of the language change. So any other questions on that procedurally? So all in favor of amending the resolution language as reflected, and I'll put it back up. Wait, no, I'm going to keep it down just so I can see. As indicated previously on the screen, all in favor of amending that language, please raise your hand. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 in favor: Kohler, Dan, Holly, and Kirsten. All opposed. Ted, Tim, Joe, Nicole, Rachel, John, and David are opposed. So the motion to amend fails. And so now we would resume the main motion, and I'll go ahead and put my screen back up. All right. So now we are back to an unamended language on this resolution. I see Kirsten is the first with her hand up in my queue.
Thank you. I would like to make a point and then propose an amendment. My point is that we have elections, board elections coming up, so 1/3 of this board will possibly not be here. This is the board that made this rate increase and said that this is because of Tri-State's rate. So I would like to see this be the board that also says, okay, you guys, that didn't happen, and that was our reasoning, and we should be getting it back to you. So I'd like to do that. My amendment that I would like to offer is to strike the bracket part of the resolution where it says to be included in the general capital credit retirements during 2025 retirement cycle. I see no reason to tie this to the overall retirement when it is a very specific allocation and retirement.
And
I would love a second on my amendment.
do we have a second?
Dan will second.
Okay. This motion has been seconded to amend as currently indicated on the screen. Proceed to discussion on that motion. And
so are you chairing?
You can take it back over, Tim. I'm just
I'm not asking, I'm just asking for clarification.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to sort of manage this as a sort of parliamentarian, perhaps, instead of chair, if that board thinks that'll be the most reasonable way to handle the discussion.
Well, there's been a shift here, so I'm just curious. I'm just trying to clarify.
Sure.
What my role.
Tim, I think you make the call. You want the gavel right now. It's yours. If you'd rather have Graham chair through this, that's fine. But whether Graham chairs or doesn't chair, he'll still be our parliamentarian in the matter.
Okay. All right.
So your call.
Yeah, that does make me uncomfortable, but I'll call it as I'll still chair. All right. Because I don't think I should be making that call. All right, go ahead, John. This is
Yeah, thank you.
specific to this amendment, by the way.
We're in discussion for this amendment.
Yes.
Yes.
To strike that.
Let me
sentence.
lower my hand then, and we'll finish this process. Thank you.
Joe, are you talking?
Yeah. I'm just a little confused how Kirsten's amendment is different from what Kohler proposed. She could explain.
Well, she's
May I?
okay. Yes, go ahead.
So Kohler's proposal is how we break up the retirement. How much of it is going to be towards rate stabilization and how much is going to be towards 2024 LIFO. Mine isn't about that at all. Mine doesn't discuss how we break that, how we retire that, or how we allocate the rate stabilization. Mine is about when do we do it, and right now, because of the wording in there that's in brackets, and I don't know why it's in brackets, of to be included in the general capital credit retirements during the 2025 retirement cycle, that means that this special allocation and special retirement is going to be happening along with everything else. I would like to give this much more visibility. This should have the visibility that says, this is what we promised you, and this is what we're doing. And we do that by having a special retirement, and it's only going to be about the 6 months worth and what out of those 6 months worth makes financial sense to retire at that point. So I don't want to do it at a time. I would love to be able to do this in the middle of winter when people have high electric bills, and not wait until much later when we're able to really do the general retirement, which tends to be later because we got to work through all our other financials. So I don't want to tie this to 2025 retirement cycle. That's why I'm asking for it to be taken out.
I think we got Kirsten. Kirsten, I think we got it. I'm going to ask Graham to. That was not in the motion that we passed in the FAC. I think that was added later. I think it was purely to be clear about when. So is there anything else you want to add as you drafted that as to why that language is that might help us?
Yeah, so the idea was that, right, if this is going to be done as capital credits on the budget that occurred in 2024, the earliest we can do it is after the 2024 margins have been allocated. So we can't if you do it at any time before then, it's not really a capital credit retirement, it's just a straight refund. So if this is going to be a LIFO capital credit retirement, we have to first close the books on 2024, have our allocation, and then we can retire it. But if we don't do it that way, which would put it in 2025, and we just wanted to sort of try to be clear to everybody, especially those who couldn't attend the FAC meeting, that 2020, that just because it says 2024 in it, the money wouldn't go out the door in 2024. It would have to go out the door in 2025 if it's going to be in the form of a LIFO capital credit retirement. So that's part of why that was in brackets, was to sort of like indicate that it's sort of a notation to explain the mechanics of it, I guess.
Yes, thank you. Anything else? Patrick, did you have any comment on that?
Just the only comment I would say is that as it's written, it looks like it obligates us to pay this in cash in 2025. And so for me, I mean, John's statements he made earlier, there's wisdom to that. And it is a more conservative play from the finance standpoint. And I'm going to obviously take your direction on this, but that's my only further comment.
Is it more work for finance?
It'll be more work, but that's not necessarily the issue. I think for me, the issue is that we are in a sea change, and there is a certain amount, there's a great deal of uncertainty that's out there. So having flexibility, there's wisdom to that. I understand there's obligations. For me, what's the overall risk to deferring these or keeping this? I know there's political risk and there's other issues at hand, but those are the things you all have to weigh as board members, and I appreciate the tough decision you have in your hand. For me, that would be the finance committee, or not finance committees, but finance department's kind of position on it. So I appreciate the robust discussion.
And do you, just to clarify, does this language in there provide less or more flexibility for you?
It seems to provide less flexibility to me because it obligates us to pay in 2025, as I interpreted it. Because you're saying that we were saying that we are going to retire in 2025. That retirement means a cash event. So that looks like that reduces flexibility.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify we're all on the same page here. So I think, Rachel, you're next here.
I think a lot of what I was wondering got answered. I just want to make sure I understood. So Patrick, if you were to advise the most conservative, like through the mechanism we're staring at right now, this resolution with its amendment, if you were to advise what is the most conservative and flexible option, is it to do anything to pass this resolution, or is it to just let this float? I guess I've got a little lost.
Table it.
Table it. Okay, great. And then that brings up my second question, which is just a mechanics question. When and how does someone insert a request that we table this? Do we have to get through this vote first, or can that be presented?
I mean, procedurally, we can move to table this right now. And frankly, I mean, we have Matt Larson coming on right now. It's probably likely we would at least need to continue this discussion to later in the meeting, one way or another. But we can table the entirety, which would be tabling. You could move to table both the subsidiary motion and the main motion to a future meeting, or to later in this meeting.
Great. I move that we table both the subsidiary motion and the main motion to a later meeting.
To a later meeting. Okay.
Yep.
So, okay. John Witchell, second. Okay. So I'm going to take this down. So we'll go ahead and proceed with the motion to table. All in favor of tabling this to a future meeting, please raise your hand. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. All opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3 opposed. And Joe, I see your hand up. Is your hand up as opposed? I'm sorry. Oh, and now
we lost Joe.
Don't see Joe.
That's one way to get a vote out of it.
Yeah. So I mean, it appears that 7 of the 11 had moved to table this to a later meeting anyway, so that motion was going to carry regardless of which side of the vote that Joe was on. So Joe, just for the record, I wasn't sure, were you in favor of the table motion or against the table motion?
Sorry, my connection just suddenly disappeared. I was in favor of the table.
You are in favor of the table motion. Okay, so the table motion carries. We will bring this up at a future meeting.
Well,
Can I ask one question before we move on? I think we can answer it pretty quickly. In our original motion to, with this tri-state matter, did we say in that motion that if tri-state did not get their rate increase in time that we would refund, or did we leave it open? Does anyone have that original motion available?
I would just suggest that since this is tabled, that that be a request, Joe, that we have that information for the next discussion.
Okay.
Somebody capture that, because I did not.
I did. So I'll get that information to the whole board.
All right, so I guess that's the end of the FAC report. Thanks, everyone. More lively discussion.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim, for facilitating lots of lively discussion over the last month. So that brings us to item B in the board action, but we're also behind time on agenda item 6, which is attorney update, and we do have Matt available. So unless I see objection from the board, we're going to move items B and C from board action until after executive session. Is there any objection to that agenda change? Okay, I don't see any. Then we're going to move to agenda item 6, which is attorney update. And we'll go ahead and turn the floor over to Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ted. Nice to see all of you. A few quick updates for the public consumption purposes. Since we last met, Tri-State did file its updated rate case. We're evaluating that case. It takes the structure of asking for, a formula rate, but also deferring certain issues into settlement judge procedures, including the direct assignment issue of non-network transmission. So that would go into a settlement process under Tri-State's proposal. As of right now, we have not taken a position on that rate filing. So it did not come in with LPEA support. We're evaluating that. The intervention deadline is at the end of this week. We intend to move forward with an intervention in that case. Can certainly talk more about that in executive session if helpful. The CTP appeals are beginning to move forward both in the 10th Circuit and the DC Circuit. They're going to be getting consolidated and they're going to be tried in one of those two courts. Waiting to see where that outcome is, but we are engaged in that. And as that process moves forward, we'll continue to update the public and also update the board of directors. So that kind of handles the FERC side of things. With respect to the PUC, Tri-State's Electric Resource Plan continues to move through the process. Tri-State has a settlement deadline on Monday to try to file a settlement with the Colorado PUC. And in addition to that, Tri-State has a rebuttal testimony deadline next Wednesday. Depending on whether the case settles or not, there's a hearing set in July for that matter. So we've been engaged in discussions on that front. Can also provide an update in executive session, but that's kind of where that case sits. So that's really the big regulatory matters that have unfolded since we last met. Can take any questions or we can also discuss a little bit in executive session.
Go ahead, Joe.
Matt, will if we can discuss it now, but will the CTP appeals, could that have a material effect on our buyout cost?
It could. I think it very much depends though, does FERC's order get upheld or does it get reversed and remanded in some way back to FERC? So that'll remain to be seen depending on what happens.
Okay.
Probably the best update I can give at the moment. Is very, very early in that appeal, Joe, just for clarity's sake.
Okay, I don't see any more hands for questions right now. So we're about ready to move into executive session. A couple of maybe agenda topics just prior to doing that. I heard earlier a desire to have some further discussion about one or some of our key accounts in executive session. I think that request came from you, Joe. So if there aren't objections, we will add that to the executive session agenda. And there was also an offline request that since we may have time to get to this, that we have some board to staff discussion on the previously presented communications plan and have some of that discussion in executive session. So again, if I don't see any objections to that change, we will include that in our executive session discussion. I do see Rachel's hand up.
I guess I'd just be curious why that one would be an executive session. The latter, totally on board with.
The comms plan you're asking about. Yeah, I'm gonna lateral that question to Graham.
At this point, it's a draft plan, right? That doesn't have, we don't want to sort of unnecessarily set expectations on something that isn't fully formed yet. And there has been a request to have some candor associated with that discussion that I think would be appropriate to have it in executive session. It doesn't preclude us from having follow-up on the record discussions when we come out of executive session, but I appreciate the nature of the candor of the discussion and the draft status of the plan. We don't want to sort of improperly signal something is complete yet. We often sort of manage draft procedures in executive session so as not to incorrectly set expectations.
Does that seem reasonable, Rachel, as a reason for doing it in executive session?
I think so. I look forward to giving an update to the public about the kind of any results that came from that. And I also hope that candor in an executive session is not code language for not our behavior. I hope we all behave appropriately and respect.
No, I appreciate that. So if you don't mind, I might just sort of fully announce, or I guess we'd take the motion first and then I could, or here why don't I announce the topics and then somebody could move on these topics. So the notations I have based on the amended agenda is that we would enter executive session to have an attorney update on FERC and related actions, discuss potential energy management partners, have an update from the CEO selection committee, have an update on the Finance and Audit Committee's executive session, receive some questions regarding key accounts, and discuss the communications plan.
Tim, your hand's up.
Yeah, I think for one of those, CEO selection, there is a director that needs to be recused. We have to.
Yeah, and we can note that in the minutes of whoever is recused from any subsidiary of often when we had a tri-state director.
I'm not sure that's appropriate either. I'm just sort of saying that when we get there, we have to make sure that that discussion takes place without that director.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm not asking for public notification.
Okay, so based on Graham's language, do we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Tim. And I see Dan Huntington as a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of moving to executive session, say aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, then we will move over into executive session for those topics. Everybody find your link, log off here, log on there. Okay, so we're back in public session. There are no actions coming out of executive session. And so if you remember, we left off on agenda item 5B, which is Committee on Policies update. We don't have John Lee with us today. So I'll give kind of the very brief update on that. In the last Committee on Policy meetings, our only agenda item was review of Policy 129, our Code of Ethics policy. We looked at both committee member and additional board member comment on that policy. It's pretty long, 10-ish pages long, and so we only got about halfway through it in that committee meeting, and that will be our agenda for the June 24th meeting to dig back into that, hopefully complete that review and bring a recommendation back to the board after that. So that's the update on Committee on Policies. Any questions on that? All right. Agenda item 5C, appoint the La Plata County and Archuleta County Fair delegates. We have a memo on that. And let's see, does anybody need background on this? Otherwise, we can move right into motion language or appointments. Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Nicole Pitcher to be the Archuleta County Fair designee.
Nicole, would you accept that nomination?
I do. Thank you, Kirsten.
Kohler, your hand's up next.
I just want to put my name forward. If no one else is interested, I'd like to do it.
Okay, thank you. Kohler self-nominates.
Second.
He's got support from Joe. Rachel, go ahead.
I was just reading through this and was curious what the thank you is. Like, is that for the nominee? I'm assuming we give it to the fair, but there's like tickets to a Broncos or yeah, I didn't know what those were.
You get to go. Or give it back, but you do get to go.
Rachel, is that a clear enough answer for you, or would you like more?
No, I think that makes it clear. So those prizes go to the delegate.
Okay. Tim.
I assume our attorneys look to see that those aren't in excess of our gift rules.
That's a good point. I can look into that. I'd say that at a certain point, I'm not that concerned about it because largely it's you know, this is a charitable function. We're not sort of gaining a sort of economic advantage through the fair itself. You know, this is you know, we have live auction budget. So there's not a direct correlation, like the children whose livestock we're purchasing aren't the ones who are enticing us with these tickets. But I would say this. So let me back up and say this. We have an exclusion for casual entertainment and under that policy. And I would say that, yes, this does fit casual entertainment. And so, but other than that, I'm happy to look into it deeper before anybody feels the need to accept or reject those tickets. I think we could still go ahead and assign delegates, and I can have more information to follow on whether I think it might be worthwhile to acknowledge those tickets. But my gut reaction is that they would fall under the casual entertainment exemption.
I think it'd just be good to make sure that's an official opinion is given, please. Thanks.
Rachel, you're next.
Nope, that's an accident.
All right, then Kirsten's next.
Yeah, I know the last couple of years for La Plata, we've had John Lee. I know that last year Rachel expressed interest, but we still voted in John Lee. And I believe he said that he would more than be happy to help educate Rachel in it. Rachel, I would like to nominate you if you're up for it.
I didn't even think I'd try this year because I figured I wouldn't win, but yeah, I'd love to.
Okay.
Okay. So we have Rachel as a nominee. Any other nominees? Self-nominations? Okay, then. Oh,
can I clarify what I thought I heard from Kohler? And it might be incorrect. I thought you heard you would be interested, you'd be willing to do it if no one else was interested, or is that the case? So since Rachel is interested, you'll withdraw your nomination? Yep.
No. Okay, well, thanks, Graham, for the clarification, and thanks, Kohler, for your willingness and flexibility on that. So it appears we have one nominee for Archuleta County. Oh, Tim, sorry, I see your hand up
as a question.
I just wanted to know if Graham was steering us somewhere.
Well, that's not my sort of like livestock skill, I guess. Herding cats is, if there's a cat herding portion of the rodeo, I'll sign up for that.
We're getting punchy here. Thanks.
All right. Well, we're at a point where I believe it's a fill in the blank exercise on the suggested motion. I see Dan Huntington's hand. You're still on mute, Dan.
I'd just like to correct some things in the memorandum. The 4-H clubs do not actually get the money from this. It's the individual 4-H or FFA member. It's not strictly 4-H. There's our FFA members showing animals, and the clubs do not, I guess they do indirectly through the individual, but not directly from the proceeds from the livestock auction. So just kind of clarify that. But anyway, yeah, no, I don't have any other thing. Nominees are good. If Rachel and Kohler wanted to get together and do this, I don't believe, you did not get with John last year. He didn't invite you, did he? Okay. So Kohler, if you'd want to mentor her this year and maybe show her the ropes, would be great.
Thank you, Dan. Holly.
I'd like to move to nominate Rachel Landis to the La Plata County Fair and Nicole Pitcher to represent at the Archuleta County Fair.
Thank you for that motion, Holly.
Second.
Thank you, Kirsten, for the second. Any more discussion on those nominees? Seeing none, all in favor of Holly's motion, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or abstentions? Okay, we have our representatives for the fair. Thank you for the nominations and thank you for the acceptances of those. Gets us to, that gets us through board action agenda. We're back to the agenda after executive session, which is section 9, the reports section. Attorney report from Graham.
I just refer to my written report and take any questions.
Who has anything for Graham at this point? Nothing there. Okay. And then director reports. We'll go down through the list and highlights or questions. Anything from Roundup? Okay. Joe.
No, I'd just like to thank the Roundup committee for continuing to fund these projects and spend the money that we have.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a joy to be able to represent LPEA and everybody who's contributed to Roundup, our members, and the community has a big need. And I know we also help out with CEAC, and I appreciate that, Joe. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Roundup. Anything that we need to discuss from CREA? I see Kirsten's hand. Kirsten's hand up. Holly, do you have anything you want to start with?
No, not in particular. There wasn't a CREA meeting in between here and the last time when David was in attendance and reported on that. The next meeting is next Friday, a week from this one, and it is virtual. The newsletter in the board packet was just their general newsletter, and I really did appreciate the heat stroke versus heat exhaustion thing. That's really super important. So you might want to review that. Tim, did you have a question for me, sir?
Yeah, the co-ops that are helping on the Navajo Nation. I've never seen a list of the co-ops that are doing that, and I wondered if LPEA is participating in that in any way.
Sir, LPA is not participating in that at this point in time, but I have seen a list of those cooperatives and I can dig that up for you and send it out.
That'd be great. Thank you, Colleen.
Kirsten?
Yeah, last month when I asked about the would we be participating, I think Graham had said, yeah, we can look into it for the future. So that definitely is on at least the thinking horizon for LPEA. Out of your report, Holly, came a question for me that's not necessarily for you, and that is the part of the newsletter that talks about it, that it's co-op annual meeting season, and it is, and co-ops tend to like to invite folks either from CREA or from other co-ops or from Tri-State and such. And I'm just wondering if we can have a preview. Are we thinking about inviting anybody from outside LPEA? Graham, can you or Amanda address that?
I don't think we had planned on it at this point, but if that's a discussion the board wants us to begin to have, we can have that sort of discussion and begin to think about a list of invitees. I mean, obviously we sort of invite local people who are typically already members anyway, but local community leaders and regional leaders of that sort specifically.
It is an opportunity. I would suggest we think about it, whether it be a county commissioner, perhaps a state representative or a state senator. Those are good ideas. I don't want to influence that decision, but don't think that just because we didn't do it last year that we don't need to at least think about it this year. Is my encouragement.
Thanks, Kirsten. Just a point of clarification for me. What are you suggesting that we would invite these outside entities to?
Oh, to the annual meeting.
Okay.
We're talking about the annual meeting stuff. And typically it's a keynote address. It's, we give somebody 10 minutes to talk about whatever we ask them to talk about.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, that's that, I think, unless there's more hands, gets us through CREA. And then Tri-State report is included in the packet. Any comments or questions in regard to that? Tim?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of note a couple things in the report. One is it seems like Tri-State is in their report to us on their first page from the CEO, federal funding. They're highlighting that there are significant greenhouse gas emissions place Tri-State at the top of the list for funding. And I just found that odd. It's like they're touting the fact that because they were never investing in their greenhouse gas reduction, that they now get the opportunity for a lot of funding of tax dollars to do so. And I don't know, it seems backwards to me. Let me just go real quick through. I thought I had another note down here. Where is it? Sorry. All right, I think I'll stop there, frankly.
We'll pass it over to Kirsten for a minute.
That's an interesting take on that comment. I would one of the things that Tri-State has found out in the last couple of months is one of the things that new ERA was comparing was how much bang will we get for our buck? How much will we see in emissions reduction? And they saw that Tri-State had their projects and what they were asking for the grants for was a larger. So the fact they started from a larger, yes, does allow them to have a larger reduction. But as far as spending taxpayers' money, new era is about getting the most bang for the buck.
Thanks, Kirsten. Rachel, I see your hand.
I don't know if this is a question anyone knows off the top of their head, but because we are looking at this energy future where all this funding is getting allocated X, Y, and Z. Is that are those programs and those funds secured no matter who's in the presidency? Like, are they secured?
Does anyone have an intelligent comment on that question?
And if not, I'll do homework. I just was curious if anyone knows off the top of their head.
I think all you'll find are opinions on that at this point, right? And so it would
Okay.
just be speculative for me or anyone else to opine on that.
Okay, so that means it's up for question. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Just don't have an answer.
I didn't quite understand the question. I'm sorry.
If there is a different party in charge of at least the White House and probably the entire federal government, are these IRA and other funds at risk? Is there a possibility of them being clawed back? And I've heard differing opinions from different people. I sort of have my own opinion that is not any more insightful than any other individual taxpayers on that. So I don't know that I need to be offering it publicly.
Okay, thanks.
All right, that wraps up the tri-state piece, which brings us to the end of the normal agenda. Is there anything that anyone else wants to bring up prior to adjournment? Rachel, I see your hand.
Well, I was just wondering if Dan wanted to walk us through the emissions report. If there was anything, any kind of context, color in besides what we can see there. And if not, if it's literally just read it and that's what you get, then no need.
I'd be glad to touch on that a little bit. There's not a whole lot more to add to it other than each year Tri-State sends us their composite CO2 emissions rate. And so the way this is calculated is that, we take that, which includes, all the generation they run, the purchases they make, the WAPA allocation and all that. And then we say 95% of our power supply, it's actually like 94.9 because we're a little oversubscribed, of our power supply is that. And then the remaining 5.1% is our cell phone green projects. And, apply a 0% carbon rate on the 5.1 and Tri-States on the other section, blend that together, and that's what we get. You'll see that it came down this last year, but that wasn't necessarily due to Tri-State adding more green renewable projects to the portfolio. Rather, it was that I think their Craig unit was out of the pricing for several months. And so they were running Craig less and purchasing from the markets more, which reduced their footprint a little bit. And then, and so it could actually come up again next year, which is sort of what that chart's indicating, is back up to the previous year's normal. But until they add more green projects, there's not a significant drop. And so then what we're doing with the forecasting into the future is using what Tri-State's saying in their responsible energy plan and using the emission rate that's forecasted for that, which is also actually, this one is actually based on the energy resource plan that they have proposed there. So we've got out carbon projections for that we're using. So once we have our own power supply mapped out, then we would transition to following that as opposed to any kind of trend from Tri-State. So does that help you, Rachel?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you. And then, yes, and then the LPA goal column. Oh, okay, I got it. Never mind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Dan Huntington, other comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to, for those of you that don't know, John Lee's mother-in-law passed away in Ohio, so that's the reason he's been gone. So if you want to send out condolences.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for that, Dan. And Kirsten,
Yes, concerning the carbon chart that we're looking at there. So these are reporting these on the same chart. And I infer from that we're using just emissions as or just our power supply as the measurement. When we started the 50% based upon 2018, we also talked about carbon footprint, and it included our operations, including our trucks and such. And at that time, we were told, well, it's really hard to, it's hard to measure about that, but we'll be working on that. So my question is, have we kind of given up working on that, and we're just going to use it based on power supply?
Kirsten, my understanding is that all along it was based on power supply, but let me dig into that.
Yeah, I can dig for you. I'll send you the references.
Thank you.
okay, anybody else? If not, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you very much for all your time over the last week and a half. We're getting a lot done, and it's at no small effort by this group and the rest of staff. So many thanks for that, and meeting adjourned for the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.